Leo, a watchmaker whose quiet passion was a universe away from the glittering world of luxury he inhabited, was about to have his life turned upside down. He worked with his head down, finding solace in the microscopic dance of gears and springs, not in the hefty commissions his colleagues chased. His simple cardigan and soft-spoken nature made him an anomaly within the marble-clad sanctuary of Geneva's Zenith Horology, a place that sold time but had little for those who couldn't afford it. His manager, Mr. Alistair Finch, a man stitched together by arrogance and a tailored suit, saw Leo as a necessary but regrettable part of the business. He despised Leo's gentle nature. But Alistair had no idea that his disdain for the common man was about to cost him everything. For when he publicly fired Leo for an act of simple kindness towards a shabbily dressed old man, he set in motion a chain of events that would end in his own humiliation. The next morning, a silent, imposing convoy of 3 black SUVs would arrive outside Leo's modest apartment, and what happened next left everyone speechless. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. Leo found a quiet rhythm in the intricate world of horology, a world that existed far from the polished, sterile showroom of Geneva Zenith Horology. His passion wasn't for the gleaming status symbols locked away in glass cases, but for the soul of the machine, the near magical precision of hundreds of tiny components working in perfect harmony. He was a craftsman, a purist, in an environment that increasingly valued the salesperson's pitch over the artisan's touch. His workspace, a small, brightly lit nook at the back of the store, was a sanctuary of focused silence, filled with the scent of fine oils and the faint, rhythmic ticking of movements undergoing repair. He wore a simple, gray cardigan over a plain white t-shirt, his clothes chosen for comfort and utility, not for show. This made him stand out like a sore thumb against the backdrop of shimmering chrome, polished mahogany, and his colleagues, who were always dressed in sharp, expensive suits. They saw customers as walking wallets, their value measured in potential commission. Leo saw the stories behind the watches they wore, the sentimentality that a time-telling device could hold. He was, in every sense, an outsider within the very walls that housed his life's work. His heart beat in time with the escapement wheels he so carefully calibrated, a steady, unassuming rhythm in a world of loud, ostentatious displays of wealth. He felt more at home with his loupe pressed to his eye, exploring the miniature city within a watch case, than he ever did making small talk with the city's elite. This fundamental disconnect was the source of a quiet, simmering tension between him and the man who ran the showroom, a man who represented everything Leo was not. The contrast was a visual and philosophical chasm that grew wider with each passing day, a silent prelude to a confrontation that was as inevitable as the turning of the tides. The air in the boutique was always cool and still, carrying only the faintest whisper of expensive leather and the silent judgment of the price tags. Mr. Alistair Finch was a man who believed a person's worth could be accurately assessed by the brand of their shoes and the cut of their suit. By his own metric, he was a king. His suits were impeccably tailored, his silk ties were always secured with a perfectly executed Windsor knot, and his shoes gleamed with a polish that reflected the cold, artificial lights of the showroom. He moved through Geneva Zenith Horology not as a manager, but as a curator of an exclusive club, and his primary role, as he saw it, was to be its gatekeeper. He had a sneer that he could deploy with surgical precision, a slight curl of the lip that communicated disdain more effectively than words ever could. He saw Leo not as a skilled horologist, but as a grease monkey, a backroom necessity who, regrettably, sometimes had to be seen by the clientele. He frequently made passive-aggressive comments about Leo's simple attire, suggesting it lowered the tone of the establishment. "Leo," he'd say, his voice dripping with condescension, "do try to remember we're selling 5-figure timepieces, not fixing lawnmowers." To Finch, the intricate mechanics of the watches were irrelevant. Their only true function was to signify status. He couldn't tell a tourbillon from a balance spring, but he could recite the retail price and profit margin of every item in the store from memory. His interactions with his staff were less about management and more about asserting his dominance. He particularly enjoyed correcting Leo in front of others, using his perceived authority to belittle Leo's quiet expertise. There was a junior sales associate, a young woman named Sarah, who often witnessed these exchanges with a knot in her stomach. Sarah was new to this world of aggressive luxury, and was both intimidated by Finch and deeply impressed by Leo's calm dignity and profound skill. She saw the way his hands moved with such reverence and precision over the delicate movements, and she knew he possessed a kind of value that Finch could never comprehend. She wanted to speak up, to defend him, but the fear of Finch's wrath kept her silent, a reluctant bystander to the escalating tension. The conflict between Leo and Finch was a slow-burning fire, fueled by dozens of small incidents. Finch saw Leo's dedication to craftsmanship as a waste of time that could be better spent on upselling cleaning services or expensive accessories. Less time tinkering, more time selling, Leo. He would often drone, gesturing vaguely towards the front of the store. The real money is out here, not in your little workshop. He would often interrupt Leo's delicate work to ask him to perform menial tasks, like polishing display cases or rearranging stock. Jobs clearly outside the purview of a master technician. It was a petty power play, designed to remind Leo of his place in Finch's carefully constructed hierarchy. One afternoon, a wealthy client had brought in a vintage timepiece that was running slightly fast. Leo, after a careful examination, explained that it just needed a minor regulation, a simple adjustment. Finch, however, swooped in and convinced the client that it required a full prestige overhaul, a vastly more expensive and unnecessary service. Leo felt a surge of indignation, but held his tongue, his protest silenced by Finch's triumphant, smug glare. It was this focus on profit over integrity that truly grated on Leo's soul. He believed that the heart of their profession was trust and a respect for the history of the craft. Finch believed it was about extracting the maximum amount of cash from every person who walked through the door. This philosophical divide created a constant, unspoken battle. The very atmosphere of the boutique felt charged with their opposing energies. Leo's quiet, respectful diligence versus Finch's loud, rapacious ambition. Sarah, the kind witness, saw it all. She saw the frustration in Leo's eyes, a frustration he never voiced, and the casual cruelty in Finch's demeanor. She would often try to offer Leo small gestures of support, a quiet cup of coffee left on his workbench, a sympathetic smile when Finch was out of sight. She knew something had to give. The delicate balance of power, or rather, the imbalance of it, was becoming unsustainable. A storm was brewing within the hushed, climate-controlled walls of Geneva Zenith Horology, waiting for the right catalyst to finally break. The catalyst arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in the form of an elderly man named Mr. Harrison. He pushed the heavy glass door open with a slight hesitation, as if he knew he was crossing a threshold into a world that was not his own. He was dressed in clothes that spoke of a long and humble life, a tweed jacket with worn leather patches on the elbows, a pair of faded corduroy trousers, and simple, scuffed brown shoes. He looked around the opulent showroom, his eyes, clear and observant, taking in the gleaming displays and the cold, judgmental stare of Mr. Alistair Finch. He didn't carry the air of wealth or entitlement that was the boutique's native currency. Instead, he carried an aura of quiet dignity, a quality that was entirely lost on the store's manager. Finch's eyes swept over the old man, and in a fraction of a second, he had weighed, measured, and dismissed him. In Finch's mind, the man was a wanderer, a stray who had somehow mistaken their temple of luxury for a public thoroughfare. He began to move towards the entrance, his posture stiffening, preparing to politely but firmly eject the unwelcome presence. Leo, from his bench in the back, glanced up and saw the old man. He noticed the gentle way he held his hands, the respectful curiosity in his gaze as he looked at the watches. He saw a man, not a balance sheet. Finch, on the other hand, saw only a problem to be disposed of. The quiet, sterile air of the boutique suddenly felt heavy with an unspoken question. The contrast between the unassuming visitor and the aggressively luxurious surroundings was stark and unsettling. It was a tableau of impending conflict, the setup for a morality play that was about to unfold on the polished marble floor. The ticking of the dozens of clocks seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the tense silence of anticipation. Sarah, who was adjusting a display near the front, held her breath. She had seen this look on Finch's face before, and it never preceded anything good. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the first act of a drama about true worth was about to begin. Alistair Finch glided across the marble floor, his movements smooth and predatory. He intercepted the elderly man before he had taken more than 3 steps into the showroom. "Good afternoon, sir," he began, his voice a silken sheath over a steel blade of condescension. "I believe you may be a little lost. The public library is just down the street." He smiled, a tight, humorless expression that did not reach his eyes. Mr. Harrison looked at him, his expression unruffled by the thinly veiled insult. "I am not lost, young man," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I am here because this is a watch shop, and I have a watch that needs attention." Finch's smile tightened further. "I see. Well, this is a very particular kind of establishment. We cater to a specific clientele. Perhaps a kiosk at the mall would be better suited to your needs." The insult was now fully unsheathed. Every word was designed to humiliate, to make the old man feel small and out of place. He gestured dismissively around the room, as if to say, "Look at all this. This is not for you." Several wealthy patrons, a man and a woman browsing a case of diamond-encrusted timepieces, glanced over, their faces a mixture of mild amusement and embarrassment. They were part of the audience Finch was playing to, reinforcing his status as the gatekeeper of this exclusive world. Sarah, standing by a counter, felt a flush of shame on Finch's behalf. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. The cruelty was so casual, so unnecessary. It was a pure display of power for its own sake, a man flexing his authority over someone he perceived as powerless. Leo, at his workbench, had stopped what he was doing. He was watching the exchange, his hands frozen over the delicate movement he had been assembling. A familiar feeling of righteous anger began to build in his chest. This was Finch at his worst, using the store's luxury as a weapon against someone's dignity. The manager was not just selling watches, he was selling a brand of cruel exclusivity, and Leo found it increasingly repulsive. Mr. Harrison did not seem to be seeking a fight, only a service. He appeared unfazed by Finch's patronizing tone, his focus solely on the object he held carefully in his hand. "I don't wish to purchase a new watch," he explained patiently, as if speaking to a difficult child. He slowly opened his palm to reveal an old timepiece. It was not a brand that Geneva Zenith Horology currently sold, but it was clear, even at a distance, that it had once been an object of exceptional quality. The gold casing was worn smooth in places, the crystal was covered in a fine web of scratches, and the leather strap was cracked and faded. It was a watch that had lived a life, a stark contrast to the sterile, untouched models in the display cases. Its hands were frozen at 3:10. "It has stopped," Mr. Harrison said simply. "It was my wife's. It is very important to me." The sentimental value was palpable in his voice. It was a treasure not of monetary worth, but of memory. Finch glanced down at the watch with an expression of profound disgust, as if the old man had presented him with a piece of garbage. He didn't even bother to look closely. He saw only age and wear, not heritage or craftsmanship. "Sir," he scoffed, taking a small step back, "we are not a repair shop for sentimental relics. Our technicians are highly trained artisans who work on precision instruments, not aged trinkets." He straightened his signature tie, a symbolic gesture of reasserting his authority. "Frankly, the cost of our time to even look at this would be more than the object is worth. I suggest you try a pawn shop or a flea market. They might be able to help you." The finality and dismissal in his tone were absolute. He turned his body slightly, a clear signal that the conversation was over. He had passed his judgment, and in his world, his judgment was law. He expected the old man to shuffle away, properly chastised and humiliated, leaving the rarefied air of the boutique untainted by his presence. From his workstation, Leo had overheard every word. The casual cruelty of Finch's dismissal, the phrase "aged trinkets," echoed in his ears. But more than that, he had seen the watch. Even from a distance, he recognized the distinctive shape of the lugs and the elegant design of the dial. His heart gave a jolt of recognition. It was a Patek Philippe Calatrava from the 1950s, a masterpiece of understated elegance and technical perfection. It was a horological legend, a piece that any true watchmaker would be honored to even hold. To hear it dismissed as a trinket was a form of blasphemy. For Leo, this was the final straw. It went beyond Finch's personal insults to him. It was an attack on the very principles he held dear: respect for craftsmanship, for history, and for the human stories that these timepieces represented. A quiet fire ignited within him. He carefully placed his tweezers on the velvet mat, pushed back his chair, and stood up. The decision was made in an instant, a silent rebellion against the tyranny of ignorance and arrogance. As he walked from the relative darkness of his alcove into the bright lights of the showroom, it felt as though he was crossing a line he could never uncross. Sarah's eyes widened as she saw him approaching. She had never seen Leo challenge Finch directly before. Finch, hearing the footsteps, turned, an expression of annoyance flashing across his face, irritated that his perfect little act of dismissal was being interrupted. He opened his mouth to tell Leo to return to his bench, but Leo spoke first, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the tense silence of the room. "I can take a look at it, sir," he said, addressing Mr. Harrison directly and completely ignoring his manager. He met the old man's gaze with one of sincere respect and kindness, creating a small island of decency in the vast ocean of Finch's contempt. It was a simple sentence, but in the context of that moment, it was a declaration of war. The atmosphere in the boutique crackled with tension. Finch's face, which had been a mask of smug superiority, contorted into a mask of pure fury. His complexion deepened to a shade of crimson that clashed horribly with his expensive silk tie. "Leo," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper that carried across the showroom. "What do you think you are doing? Return to your station immediately." He shot a glance at the other customers, who were now watching the unfolding drama with undisguised interest. This public display of insubordination was an unforgivable sin in his eyes. Leo, however, remained focused on Mr. Harrison. He acted as if Finch didn't exist. "It's a beautiful piece," he said to the old man, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "A reference 9/6, I believe, from the golden age of watchmaking. It would be an honor." Mr. Harrison's face, which had been a stoic mask, softened with relief and gratitude. He extended his hand, offering the precious timepiece to Leo. This simple act of defiance, this choosing of kindness over protocol, sent Finch into a rage. "How dare you!" he finally boomed, his voice echoing in the hushed space. "You are undermining my authority in front of my clients. This is not some back-alley repair stall. We are a world-renowned luxury brand. We have standards." His rant was loud, ostentatious, and deeply embarrassing. He was losing control, his carefully constructed veneer of sophisticated professionalism cracking under the pressure of being ignored. He was a man whose entire sense of self was built upon the deference of others, and Leo's quiet refusal to defer had sent him spiraling. Leo took the watch from Mr. Harrison with a steady hand, the cool weight of the gold feeling significant in his palm. He gave the old man a small, reassuring nod before turning to face his apoplectic manager. He still did not raise his voice. His calmness was a stark contrast to Finch's histrionics, and it only served to infuriate the manager more. It was a silent battle of wills being fought in the center of the showroom, and for the first time, Finch was beginning to lose. Ignoring the fuming manager who stood sputtering beside him, Leo turned his full attention to the watch. He led Mr. Harrison not to his official, sterile workbench in the back, but to a small, clean counter near the front, placing a soft velvet cloth down first. It was a deliberate choice, an act of transparency and respect. He wanted the old man to see, to be part of the process. He opened his personal toolkit, a well-worn leather roll that contained instruments as fine and precise as a surgeon's. Finch continued his tirade in the background. "This is an outrage. You are making a mockery of this establishment. We do not service unauthorized brands. It's against all company policy." His voice was becoming increasingly shrill, a desperate attempt to reclaim control of a situation that had slipped completely from his grasp. The other customers and Sarah watched, mesmerized. Leo worked with a focused grace that seemed to block out the noise. He picked up his loupe, fitting it to his eye, and leaned in. The world shrank to the size of the watch dial. He gently worked a case knife into the seam and, with a soft click, the back of the watch came away, revealing the movement within. It was, as he suspected, a marvel of engineering. Even after all these years, he saw the problem almost instantly. A minuscule piece of lint, almost invisible to the naked eye, had become lodged in the delicate teeth of the escapement wheel, jamming the entire mechanism. For a watchmaker of Leo's skill, It was the equivalent of a splinter. He selected a pair of impossibly fine tweezers, and, with the steady hand of a bomb disposal expert, he reached in. He held his breath, his concentration absolute. In that moment, he was not just a technician, he was a healer, tending to a heart that had stopped beating. He carefully plucked the offending particle away, and as he did, the balance wheel, freed from its prison, began to oscillate, joyfully, rhythmically. The watch was alive again. The entire operation had taken less than 2 minutes. A soft, rhythmic ticking filled the air around the counter, a sound of life restored. Leo removed the loop from his eye and smiled, a genuine, warm smile of pure satisfaction. He held the watch up to Mr. Harrison's ear. The old man's face broke into a wide, beatific grin, his eyes, which had been clouded with worry, now shining with unshed tears of joy and relief. "Oh, my boy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You've done it. I don't know how to thank you." He reached for his wallet, his hands trembling slightly. "Please, I must pay you for your time, whatever the cost." Leo gently placed a hand on the old man's arm. "There is no charge, sir," he said softly. It was a simple fix. It was a privilege to work on a piece with such character and history. Just seeing it run again is payment enough. This exchange, this moment of pure, unadulterated kindness and professionalism, was the final, unforgivable insult to Alistair Finch. His face, which had been red with rage, now paled to a sickly white. The sight of his employee refusing payment, acting out of pure passion for the craft, was a rejection of everything Finch stood for. It was a personal and professional repudiation of the highest order. He saw it not as kindness, but as the ultimate act of insubordination. He strode forward, his footsteps sharp and angry on the marble floor. He could no longer contain his fury. The last vestiges of his professional decorum fell away, leaving only raw, sputtering ego. "That's it!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "That is the final straw. You are a disgrace to this brand, Leo. A disgrace. You don't understand class, you don't understand business, and you certainly don't understand your place." He pointed a trembling finger at Leo, then at the door. "Pack your tools, get your things, you are fired, effective immediately. I want you out of my store." The declaration hung in the air, shocking everyone into silence, a silence broken only by the steady, happy ticking of the newly revived watch. The word "fired" echoed in the cavernous showroom, a stark and brutal final chord to the afternoon's drama. Leo didn't flinch. He didn't argue or plead. He simply stood there for a moment, his calm demeanor an unshakable fortress against Finch's storm of fury. He looked at Finch, then at the relieved face of Mr. Harrison, and he felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He had made his choice. He had stood for something he believed in, and he would accept the consequences with his head held high. He gave Mr. Harrison's shoulder a gentle squeeze and a small, reassuring nod, a silent message that it was all right, that he had no regrets. Then, with a quiet dignity that made Finch's outburst seem even more pathetic, he turned and walked back to his small workstation. He didn't rush. He began to pack his personal tools with the same meticulous care with which he used them. Each pair of tweezers, each tiny screwdriver, was wiped clean and placed into its specific slot in the worn leather roll. This was his true wealth, not the watches in the display cases, but the skill in his hands and the tools that were an extension of them. Sarah watched, her heart aching for him. She wanted to run over, to say something, anything, but she was frozen in place by the sheer toxicity of the atmosphere. The other customers, sensing the drama had reached its ugly climax, began to drift quietly towards the exit, eager to escape the suffocating tension. Finch stood in the middle of the floor, breathing heavily, his chest puffed out like a rooster after a fight. He believed he had won. He had asserted his dominance, purged the disloyal element, and restored order to his kingdom. "Let this be a lesson to everyone," he announced to the remaining staff, his voice still trembling slightly with adrenaline. "This is a business. We are here to make money, not to run a charity for every stray who wanders in off the street." He looked towards Leo's departing back with pure contempt, never imagining for a second that his victory was the single most self-destructive act of his entire career. He had just fired the wrong man for helping the right one. The next morning, the gray light of dawn seeped into Leo's small apartment, finding him sitting at his kitchen table, a half-empty coffee cup in his hand. The adrenaline of the previous day had faded, leaving behind a hollow feeling of uncertainty. He had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, replaying the events in his mind. He didn't regret his actions, not for a moment. But the practical reality of his situation was beginning to set in. He was unemployed. He had rent to pay. He was scrolling through online job listings on his laptop positions at mall kiosks, small family-owned jewelry stores, places that would see his skills as a mere utility, not an art form. It was a disheartening prospect. A wave of dejection washed over him as he contemplated a future of battery changes and strap replacements, a world away from the intricate dance of gears and springs that he loved. Suddenly, a low, powerful hum disturbed the quiet morning air of his modest residential street. He glanced out the window, and his breath caught in his throat. Lined up along the curb in front of his unassuming apartment building were three identical, gleaming black SUVs. They were the kind of vehicles that whispered of power and serious business, their tinted windows revealing nothing of the occupants within. They were utterly, intimidatingly out of place in his quiet, working-class neighborhood. Neighbors began to peek out of their windows, their curiosity piqued by the silent, imposing spectacle. The doors of the lead vehicle opened, and a man in a suit so sharp it looked like it could cut glass stepped out. He was tall, with an air of calm, no-nonsense authority. He scanned the front of the apartment building, his eyes seeming to lock directly onto Leo's window. Leo's heart began to pound in his chest. He had no idea what was happening. His first thought was that Finch had sent someone to intimidate him further, though that seemed impossibly petty, even for him. He watched, frozen, as the man walked with a purposeful stride towards the main entrance of his building. A few moments later, there was a firm, confident knock on Leo's apartment door. It wasn't the tentative knock of a neighbor or the rhythmic rap of a delivery person. It was a knock that expected to be answered. Leo's mind raced. Who could it be? He was filled with a mixture of apprehension and bewilderment. He took a deep breath, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. He saw the sharply dressed man from the SUV, his expression neutral and professional. Taking another steadying breath, Leo unlocked and opened the door. "Leo Vance?" the man asked. His voice was polite but carried an undeniable weight of authority. "Yes," Leo replied, his own voice barely a whisper. The man extended a hand. "My name is Arthur Sterling. May I have a moment of your time?" It was not really a question. Leo, still completely baffled, simply nodded and stepped back to let him in. Mr. Sterling entered the small apartment, his presence seeming to fill the entire space. His eyes quickly took in the humble surroundings, the simple furniture, the stack of horology textbooks on a bookshelf, the small, tidy workbench in the corner where Leo practiced his craft in his spare time. He nodded slightly, as if what he was seeing confirmed something he already knew. "I'll come straight to the point, Mr. Vance," Sterling began, his tone direct and efficient. "I am the chief of staff for Mr. William Harrison." The name didn't register with Leo at first. He just stared blankly. Sterling continued. "You met him yesterday, at Geneva Zenith Horology. You were kind enough to repair his watch." The pieces suddenly slammed into place in Leo's mind. The old man, Mr. Harrison, the SUVs outside. His heart, which had been pounding with anxiety, now began to beat with a different rhythm of utter, profound shock. He sank onto his small sofa, his legs suddenly feeling weak. "Mr. Harrison," he started, but couldn't form a complete sentence. Sterling's expression softened slightly. "He was deeply moved by your actions yesterday, Mr. Vance. By your skill, of course, but more importantly, by your integrity and your kindness." Mr. Sterling paused, letting the information settle. He could see the look of stunned disbelief on Leo's face. "Let me provide some context," he continued, his voice calm and measured. "Mr. William Harrison is a rather private individual. He is also the founder and majority shareholder of the Harrison Sterling conglomerate." He let that title hang in the air. "It's a global entity with diverse interests in technology, real estate, and, among many other things, the luxury goods sector." Leo's eyes widened. He was beginning to grasp the scale of what was happening, but it still felt like something out of a dream. The conglomerate, Sterling said, is the parent company that owns outright the entire Geneva Zenith Horology brand worldwide. The world tilted on its axis for Leo. The quiet, shabbily dressed old man he had helped, the man Alistair Finch had belittled and tried to throw out, was the ultimate owner of the entire company. The irony was so immense, so staggering, that Leo almost laughed. Finch's "my store" now sounded like the pathetic boast of an ignorant child. "The watch you repaired," Sterling went on, "was a gift to Mr. Harrison from his late wife on their first wedding anniversary. Its sentimental value to him is, to put it mildly, immeasurable. He has been distressed since it stopped working some weeks ago." He explained that Mr. Harrison had decided to visit the flagship store incognito, not just to see if the watch could be fixed, but to get an unfiltered sense of the company's culture at the ground level. What he witnessed, Sterling said, his voice hardening slightly, was deeply, deeply disappointing. He saw an environment where arrogance was valued over empathy and profit over integrity. His gaze met Leo's, and then he saw you. You were the one exception. You treated him with dignity when your manager showed him only contempt. You recognized the true worth of the object when your manager saw only a worthless trinket. You acted out of passion, not for profit. The words filled the small apartment, a powerful testament to the simple choice Leo had made. "Mr. Harrison believes that an act of kindness should be rewarded," Sterling stated, his professional tone now tinged with genuine warmth. "And an act of profound ignorance should be corrected." He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a long, elegant envelope. He placed it carefully on the coffee table in front of Leo. "Mr. Harrison was appalled by your dismissal. He believes a man of your talent and character should not be unemployed. In fact, he believes a man like you should be running his own operation." Leo just stared at the envelope as if it were a strange, alien artifact. He couldn't process the words he was hearing. "Mr. Harrison has long been concerned that the art of traditional horology is being lost, replaced by a culture of disposable luxury and soulless marketing," Sterling explained. "He has wanted to establish a philanthropic foundation dedicated to preserving and teaching the craft. A place that would train the next generation of true artisans, focusing on skill, history, and passion, not sales commissions." He gestured towards the envelope. "Inside, you will find a formal offer. Mr. Harrison would like you to be the founding director of the Harrison Horological Foundation. He is prepared to provide an initial endowment of $20 million to establish the institution. You would have complete creative and financial control to build it from the ground up, in your own vision. Your new salary, of course, would reflect the responsibilities of such a position." Leo felt the air leave his lungs. $20 million. Director. His own vision. The words swirled around him, too vast to comprehend. He looked from Sterling's calm, expectant face to the envelope on the table. He thought of his tiny workbench in the corner, his dog-eared textbooks, his hopeless search for a job at a mall kiosk just hours earlier. It was impossible. It was a fairy tale. "He believes," Sterling concluded, his voice soft but firm, "that true worth should be in charge of creating value. And he believes that man is you, Mr. Mayan." Vance. The three black SUVs waiting silently outside were no longer just vehicles. They were chariots, waiting to carry him away from his old life and into a future he could never have dared to imagine. While Leo's world was being irrevocably transformed, Alistair Finch was enjoying what he considered the spoils of his victory. He had arrived at the boutique that morning with an extra spring in his step, feeling cleansed and invigorated. In his mind, he had successfully surgically removed a cancerous growth from his otherwise perfect operation. He saw the firing of Leo not as a loss of a skilled technician, but as a necessary reassertion of the store's core values: exclusivity, profitability, and unwavering obedience to his authority. He gathered the remaining staff for a morning meeting, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. "Yesterday was a learning opportunity for all of us," he began, pacing back and forth on the marble floor. "It was a stark reminder that our brand is a fortress. It is our duty to protect its walls from those who do not belong, whether they be customers or, indeed, members of our own staff." He paused for dramatic effect, letting his words sink in. "We must never, ever devalue our brand by entertaining those who cannot appreciate it. Our time is our most valuable asset. We will not waste it on lost causes or broken trinkets." He looked around at the faces of his employees, expecting to see admiration and respect. Instead, he saw fear and apprehension. Sarah, in particular, looked pale and sick. She had barely slept, he said, his voice oozing with a practiced, sycophantic charm. Alistair Finch, General Manager. How may I be of service to you today? Are you perhaps looking for a statement piece? Something to commemorate a special achievement? Mr. Sterling didn't return the smile. His expression was as cold and hard as the polished granite floors. He stopped directly in front of Finch, his presence completely commanding the space. Alistair Finch, he said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge of steel. I am Arthur Sterling, Chief of Staff for the Harrison Sterling conglomerate. The name of the parent company hit Finch like a physical blow. He knew, of course, who owned the brand, but the C-suite executives were like gods on a distant Olympus. They never descended to the mortal realm of the retail floor. Finch's fawning smile froze on his face, a rictus of confusion and dawning horror. And we are here, Sterling continued, his voice dropping even lower, to discuss the events of yesterday afternoon. Specifically, your interaction with our founder and chairman, Mr. William Harrison. The last piece of the puzzle slammed into place. The old man, the vagrant, the stray. Finch's mind reeled as the full, catastrophic implication of his actions washed over him. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly, pale shade of gray. His carefully constructed professional veneer didn't just crack, it disintegrated into dust. Finch stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, a goldfish that had just been informed the water it was swimming in was about to be drained. Mr. Harrison? He stammered, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. The old gentleman. That was. His voice trailed off as he looked at Sterling's unyielding face and knew the horrifying truth. The two executives behind Sterling remained silent, their expressions like those of stone-faced judges about to pass sentence. Sterling let the silence hang in the air for a long, torturous moment, allowing the full weight of Finch's colossal blunder to crush him. Yes, Mr. Finch, Sterling said finally. The man you belittled, the man you insulted, the man whose priceless heirloom you dismissed as a broken trinket, and the man you tried to throw out of this store was the very same man who signs your paycheck. Or rather, who used to sign your paycheck. Finch began to sweat profusely. Droplets beaded on his forehead and trickled down his temples. It was a misunderstanding, he blurted out, his voice now a desperate pleading squeak. A terrible misunderstanding. I was only trying to protect the brand's image, the store's reputation. I had no idea. If I had known who he was. Sterling cut him off with a sharp, decisive slice of his hand. That is precisely the point, Mr. Finch. It should not matter who he was. Your behavior was unacceptable regardless. You believe this brand's image is built on exclusivity and arrogance. Mr. Harrison believes it should be built on quality, respect, and integrity. Qualities you so spectacularly failed to demonstrate. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, intense tone. You had a master craftsman on your staff, a man with more talent and integrity in his little finger than you have in your entire body, and you fired him. You fired him for showing the very kindness and professionalism that should be the cornerstone of this company. You didn't protect the brand, you disgraced it. The comeuppance was swift and absolute. There was no internal review, no suspension, no second chance. The judgment had already been passed from on high. Mr. Finch, Sterling announced, his voice ringing with cold finality. Your employment with Geneva Zenith Horology, and indeed with any subsidiary of the Harrison Sterling conglomerate, is terminated, effective immediately. One of the executives behind him stepped forward and handed Finch a thin envelope, the formal letter of dismissal. You will vacate the premises immediately. Your personal effects will be boxed up and couriered to you. You are to have no further contact with any employee of this company. Finch looked at the envelope in his hand as if it were a venomous snake. His entire world had collapsed in the span of 5 minutes. The power, the prestige, the tailored suits, the sense of superiority of it was gone. He looked around the showroom, his kingdom, which was no longer his. He saw Sarah, who was watching the scene unfold with wide, unblinking eyes, a look of profound, almost cosmic justice on her face. But, my career? Finch whispered, the words catching in his throat. My reputation. Sterling's expression was devoid of sympathy. You built your reputation on judging people by their appearance, he said, his voice cutting. Perhaps now you will learn the folly of that. You valued the price tag of everything in this store, but you never understood the concept of true worth. Consider this a learning opportunity. With that, Sterling turned his back on the disgraced manager, a final, brutal dismissal. He addressed the remaining staff. This boutique will be closed for the remainder of the day. A new management team will be in place by morning. A team that understands the values Mr. Harrison wishes this brand to embody. Finch stood alone in the center of the floor, a hollowed-out man in an expensive suit that now seemed to hang off him like a costume. He had been so obsessed with being a gatekeeper that he had failed to realize he was just a temporary custodian, and he had just been evicted from the palace in the most humiliating way imaginable. The story of Alistair Finch's spectacular fall from grace and Leo Vance's incredible rise became something of a quiet legend in the city's business circles. 6 months after that fateful day, the Harrison Horological Foundation opened its doors. It was not a stuffy, pretentious boutique, but a beautiful, light-filled space that was part workshop, part museum, and part school. Its mission was clear: to foster the next generation of watchmakers, to celebrate the art of the craft, and to make that world accessible to anyone with passion and talent, regardless of their background. At its helm was Leo Vance. He was no longer the timid technician hiding in a back room. He was a director, a leader, a mentor. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that was far more commanding than Finch's bluster had ever been. He still wore simple, clothes-well-made shirts and comfortable trousers, but now, instead of looking out of place, he looked like a man who was completely comfortable in his own skin, a man whose work spoke for itself. He had personally designed the curriculum, ensuring it focused not just on technical skill, but on the history, the ethics, and the soul of watchmaking. The foundation offered scholarships, ensuring that financial status was never a barrier to entry. Under his guidance, it quickly became one of the most respected institutions of its kind in the world. He had found his true calling, not just fixing watches, but shaping the future of the craft he loved. He had turned an act of kindness into a legacy, proving that a steady hand and a good heart were far more valuable than a sharp suit and a cutting remark. The ticking of the clocks in the foundation's workshop was a constant, gentle reminder that time, when used well, could indeed heal all wounds and build new futures. One of the very first people Leo hired to help him run the new foundation was Sarah. He had called her the day after he had accepted Mr. Harrison's offer, and she had accepted his offer of a position as the foundation's administrator without a moment's hesitation. Freed from the toxic, fear-based environment of Finch's management, she thrived. She was organized, empathetic, and shared Leo's vision completely. She handled the applications from aspiring young students, organized guest lectures from world-renowned artisans, and managed the day-to-day operations with a cheerful efficiency that set the tone for the entire institution. She and Leo had forged a strong professional partnership built on mutual respect and a shared belief in their mission. As for Alistair Finch, his life had taken a drastically different turn. Blacklisted from the high-end luxury sector, his name now a cautionary tale about arrogance, he had been forced to take a job that was, for him, the ultimate humiliation. He was now the assistant manager of the menswear department at a mid-range chain store. The suits he sold were off the rack, and the customers he served were ordinary people. One evening, while closing up the store, he saw a local news segment on a television screen in the electronics department. It was a feature on the incredible success of the Harrison Horological Foundation, highlighting its innovative programs and its charismatic director, Leo Vance. The report showed Leo, smiling, patiently teaching a young, eager student how to place a balanced spring. Finch stood there, watching the screen, his face a mixture of regret and something else, something that looked like reluctant respect. The experience had humbled him in a way he could never have imagined. He was learning, slowly and painfully, to see people not as price tags, but as people. The painful lesson had been, in its own way, a strange and bitter gift. It had stripped him of his power and prestige, but it had given him a chance to find a small piece of his own humanity. The fall had been brutal, but it had put him on a path toward a quiet, unglamorous, and perhaps, eventually, a meaningful redemption. Thus, a single, unassuming momentous choice to be kind in the face of cruelty had rippled outwards, creating waves that reshaped the lives of everyone involved. It began with the simple, quiet ticking of a restored watch, a sound of a promise kept, a memory honored. That sound became a clarion call for change. For Leo, it was the start of a new life, one where his unique talents and his compassionate heart were not just accepted, but celebrated and empowered. He went from being a hidden, undervalued artisan to a respected leader in his field, building a legacy that would outlive any single timepiece. For Mr. Harrison, it was a reaffirmation of his deepest-held beliefs, a confirmation that even in the cold corporate world he had built, decency and integrity could still be found and nurtured. For Sarah, it was an escape and an opportunity, a chance to work in an environment that valued collaboration and respect over fear and intimidation. And even for Alistair Finch, the antagonist of the story, the outcome was transformative. His public humiliation was the necessary catalyst for a painful but essential journey towards self-awareness and humility. The story teaches us a profound lesson that we often forget in our fast-paced, superficial world. True worth is not measured by the label on your clothes or the balance in your bank account. It is measured by the content of your character, the kindness you show to others, and the integrity with which you live your life. Never underestimate the power of a small act of decency. It can be a light in the darkness for someone else, and it can, in the most unexpected of ways, unlock a destiny for you that is greater than you ever dreamed possible. Have you ever witnessed a moment where kindness triumphed over arrogance? Share your experience in the comments below. We believe that these stories are important and that they connect us all. If you enjoyed this story and its message, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing it with others who might need a reminder that a good heart is the most valuable asset of all. What did you think of Alistair's lesson? Was it deserved? Let's discuss it.